sky was torn open. Crimson clouds seethed like wounded flesh, churning above the ruins of a once great city. The wind howled through broken towers and shattered temples, carrying with it the stench of burning flesh and the wails of the damned demons. Twisted and unnatural prowled the streets of this forsaken world, their grotesque forms materializing from the warp in flickers of foul energy. The air itself was thick with corruption, a palpable sense of dread sinking into the earth like rot. This was Vandra, a world on the edge of annihilation for centuries. It had stood as a beacon of imperial might, but now it was a battlefield, its soil soaked in blood and chaos. The Imperium had sent its armies, its tanks and its guns, yet all had failed. The demon had come in waves, steering through men and machines alike with ravenous hunger. And behind them, deep in the warp, something darker stirred Adam and Prince, waiting to claim the world for its own. But amidst the ruin, there was silence, a cold, grim silence that hung like a death shroud over the battlefield from the smoke-choked sky above the soundless descent. Of the grey knights began their ship, a sleek and angular strike. Cruiser loomed overhead, its engines muffled by arcane technologies like a blade slipping between ribs. The craft sliced through the atmosphere, casting no light, making no noise. No one saw their arrival. No one could. For this was their way. These were the Emperor's most secret warriors, the finer line of defense against the horrors of the warp. In perfect synchrony, the knights disembarked from their ship, their massive forms encased in silvered power armor that gleamed faintly even in the shadow of the desolation, the helmets shaped like the visages of ancient heroes, concealed faces marked by years of silent war. Each warrior moved with precise, practiced steps, their presence imposing but ghostly in one hand. Each knight bore a nemesis force weapon, and in the other, a storm boa, ready to unleash death purity seals, fluttered on their armor, marked with the holy script of the librarian. To see them was to see the Emperor's wrath made manifest, and yet none could witness them, not the broken citizens hiding in the ruins, nor the mad survivors driven to despair by the sight of the demons. The Grey Knights were unseen, their arrival known only to those who could perceive the war beyond the veil of the material. They did not fight for glory or recognition. They fought for the survival of the soul. The leader of the strike force Justicar, Feros Stro, at the front of the formation. His armor, like the others, was adorned with intricate sigils of warding, but his bore the unmistakable mark of experience, scars from battles fought in the heart of the warp itself. His thoughts were ironclad, his will unshakable, but the weight of duty pressed heavy on his shoulder arse. The mission ahead was clear: eradicate the demon incursion before it could fully consume VRA-5. A demon prince had been sensed its presence, a festering wound on the fabric of reality. To fail here would mean more than the loss of a world. It would be a victory for chaos. A crack in the armor of the Imperium. Pharaoh's visor glinted in the dim light as he surveyed the battlefield. No, the twisted forms of lesser demons stalking through the rubble. Bloodletters. Their brass armor slick with gore prowled the streets. Towering plague-bearers oozed filth from their rotting wounds, and overhead screeching horrors of Cinch darted through the air, their laughter a shrill cacophony of madness. The Jar's voice crackled through the squad's vox link. Cold and measured we per urge in his name. Advance the Grey Knights moved as one silent relentless. Their boots crushed the broken stone beneath them, but no sound escaped a psychic dampening field maintained by the librarian. Among them cloaked their approach, making them undetectable to all but the most attuned of enemies. The demons locked in their grotesque hunts did not notice the storm coming. For them then, with a single gesture, Pharos gave the command. Bowler fire erupted in disciplined volleys. The sacred ammunition tore through demon flesh, with righteous fury detonating inside their infernal bodies with holy light. Each shot was a prayer, each explosion a hymn of deliverance. The bloodletters shrieked as their bodies disintegrated their unnatural forms, unable to withstand the purity of the Grey Knights' weapons. But the true power of the Grey Knights was not in their guns as the sea demons turned to face. Their attackers, Pharos, and his brothers closed the distance. Their force weapons hummed with psychic energy, each blade attuned to the wielder will as they clashed with the demons. The air crackled with power. Pharos swung his, heard Ina wide arc, cleaving through the skull of a towering plague-bearer. His weapon flared with light as the demon's essence was consumed by the blade sent screaming back into the warp around him. His brothers fought with grim precision. Each swing of a sword, each thrust of a herd, was a lethal strike designed to banish the unholy. Their psychic powers flared, shields of force deflecting the demonic claws that sought to tear through their armor. Incantations of purity were whispered beneath their helmets, and with every kill the Emperor's light shone brighter. But even as the lesser demons fell, Pharos knew this was only the beginning. He could feel it, a cold, gwing presence in the warp drawing closer. With every moment the demon prince was watching, biding its time then, as if answering his unspoken thought. The ground trembled from the ruins of a cathedral. A massive figure emerged, its body wreathed in flames, and shadow it stood twice the height of a man, its form rippling with the corrupt power of the immaterium. The demon prince had come. Pharos felt the weight of its gaze upon him, a pressure that threatened to crush his very soul. But he stood firm. He was a Grey Knight. He was the Emperor's will. Brothers, Pharos said, his voice steady. The true battle begins now. With weapons raised and prayers on their lips, the Grey Knights charged into the heart of the storm. The flames of battle flickered in the distance, but in the mind of Justicar Pharos, another fire burned. It was not the fire of combat nor the rage that could boil over in a mortal heart. It was a deeper, more ancient flame, a remembrance carried like a burden in the souls of all Grey Knights. Ash stood before the hulking demon prince. The battlefield around him seemed to blur and distort. His thoughts drifted, carried on unseen currents of the warp back to a time before his existence, back to the earliest days when the Grey Knights were first forged in the crucible of mankind's darkest hour. The Imperium was shattered. The galaxy burned in the aftermath of the Horus heresy, when the Emperor's favored son, Horus Lupo, had been corrupted by the ruinous powers of chaos in his rebellion. Entire legions had turned traitor, and Terra itself had come under siege. Though Horus had been slain, though the Emperor had triumphed, it was a hollow victory. The Emperor's mortal body lay broken upon the golden throne, his spirit trapped in a state of eternal suffering, kept alive only by the arcane mechanisms that feed him. The souls of 1,000 pyres each day. It was in this time of despair, when the shadows of the Imperium crept closer to engulf all of humanity, that the Grey Knights were born in a forgotten chamber deep beneath the surface of Titan. A secret order gathered. Malkador, Thesagite, the Emperor's trusted confidant and regent, had summoned them, an assembly of warriors and scholars, psychers of immense power, and some of the finest battle brothers the legions had ever produced. Each had been selected for their loyalty, their strength, and their unshakable faith. They were the few who could bear the weight of the Emperor's final secret decree. Malkador, a figure robed in shadow, his ancient face furrowed by the burdens of millennia, spoke to them in hushed tones. His voice, though barely more than a whisper, echoed through the chamber with a resonance that shook the souls of those present. The Emperor foresaw This Malcador set his hands tracing strange symbols in the air, symbols that seemed to shimmer with power. He knew that even in victory, chaos would never be fully defeated. Horus is dead, but his legacy of corruption endures. The warborn threats to mankind will only grow stronger. The galaxy will need protectors, warriors who can stand against the Daon, against the horrors of the Immaterium with strength, with purity. The warriors before him were already formidable. Many were among the few loyalist survivors of the traitor legions. Veterans of the heresy, their souls scarred by what they had witnessed, they had seen there. Brothers fall to the lure of the dark gods. Some were drawn from the shattered remains of the Emperor's own legions, while others had been selected from the Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's personal god. But even they were not enough. They must be more. Then Artis Malcador continued, his voice growing cold. With the weight of the secret he carried more than soldiers. They must be incorruptible, immune to the temptations that failed even the greatest of the primer. They must be pure in both body and soul. Maldor's eyes, sharp and knowing, fixed on the assembled warriors. They will be the Emperor's secret weapon, his demon hunters, and so the work began beneath Titan, hidden from the eyes of even the most powerful factions of the Imperium. The Sigeti and his most trusted followers forged the Grey Knights. The process was one of excruciating precision. Their bodies were made from the finest gene seed, enhanced with both the genetics of the Emperor himself and esoteric elements gathered from forgotten Xenos, species, and the arcane knowledge of the Imperium's deepest archives. But their bodies were only the beginning. The mind and soul were more important than any flesh, and for this, the trials were more grueling than any that even the Adepto Estes had ever faced. Each candidate was tested psychically, torn apart, and remade through endless trials in the warp. They were exposed to the most horrific demons, forced to confront their own inner darkness, to wrestle with them maddening temptations whispered into their souls by chaos. Many were broken, their minds shattered, but those who survived became something more than human. They became unbreakable through psychic rituals. Each Grey Knight was inscribed with warding sigils invisible to the naked eye, but potent in their effect. These sigils were the Emperor's gift protections drawn from the very essence of his psychic power. They made the Grey Knights immune to the corrupting touch of chaos. No demon, no matter how powerful, could ever sway them. It was a purity bought at a great price. For these warriors were now cut off from humanity in more ways than one. They would fight in the shadows, their deeds unseen, their names erased from history. They would not be remembered, but they would be victorious. Foe. His mind snapped back to the present, but the weight of the past lingered with him. It always did. It was the silent burden. Each Grey Knight carried the knowledge of their origin, their purpose, and the price they would pay for their duty. Before him, the demon prince roared a sound that seemed to shake the very earth beneath his feet. Its voice was a sickening blend of rage and contempt, a mockery of mortal speech, as if it delighted in imitating the beings it sought to destroy. I see you, mortal. I see your soul. The Daemon Prince's voice echoed across the battlefield like a whisper in the wind, yet somehow louder than the storm of war itself, its eyes burning, with the infernal fires of the warp fixed on Pharos, studying him, testing him. You wear your Emperor's sig like chains. You are bound to his dying light. But in the end, even you will break. Pharos tightened his grip on his herd, feeling the familiar hum of psychic energy that surged through the weapon. His mind remained still, unyielding. The Diamond Prince's words had no effect on him. No fear stirred within him. He was a Grey Knight. He had been forged in the fires of the warp itself. His soul tempt. Ere it be the Emperor's will, he could not be broken. But the Daemon Prince was not finished. They all break mortal, it hissed. Even your precious emperor has fallen to darkness. His body rots upon that throne, and you, his faithful dogs, are nothing but the remnants of his folly. Pharos felt a flicker of rage rise within him. Not at the demon's words, such lies had no power over him, but at the truth buried within them. The emperor did sit upon the golden throne sustained by the agony of 1,000 souls. Each day a god in all but name, and the imperium he had built was crumbling, beset on all sides by war, heresy, and corruption. But that was why the Grey Knights existed. Not to question, not to doubt, they existed to fight. They existed to kill Pharos raised, his herd, its blade crackling with psychic energy. His voice, calm and cold, echoed through the Vox link. To his brothers form up, we strike now the demon. Prince reared back, its wings stretching wide, as if to blot out the sky. Its form seemed to swell, becoming larger, more monstrous, as the very fabric of reality warped around it. The ground trembled, cracks forming beneath its feet, as raw warp energy poured into the material world. With a roar the demon charged, but Pharos was already moving his brothers, followed in perfect unison. Their weapons raised, their psychic powers flaring to life as they prepared to face the full fury of chaos. They would not falter, they would not break. They would fight as they had always fought, in silence in the shadows, and with the certainty that they were humanity's final line of defense. The clash between the Grey Knights and the Demon Prince was cataclysmic. Lightning crackled through the air as psychic energy met warp-spawned power. Pharaoh's herd met the demons. Twisted blade, the impact sending shockwaves through the ruins. His brothers struck in coordinated volleys. Their storm BS thundered, wondering as they unleashed sanctified rounds into the beast's flesh. It howled in fury, lashing out with claws and teeth. But the Grey Knights were relentless, their will unbreakable. In the distance, the demonic horde surged forward, eager to join the Frybot. The Grey Knights held the line. Their librarian raised his for staff high, his voice booming with a chant that shook the very air. A psychic barrier shimmered into existence, cutting off the lesser demons from their master. Forno, it would be a battle between the Demon Prince and the Emperor's finest. Pharos danced around the beast's blows with practiced ease, his herd slicing through its corrupted flesh with every strike. His mind was clear, focused. Each movement calculated, each strike. Guided by the Emperor's light, he could feel the demonic presence pushing against his psychic defenses, but the wards inscribed upon his armor held strong the Demon Prince. Despite its size and power was being driven back. It bellowed in frustration, lashing out with wild fury. But the Grey Knights remained unshaken. They had faced greater foes than this. They had walked through the fires of the warp and emerged unscathed. But even as they pressed their advantage, Pharos felt it, a presence lurking at the edge of his perception. A deeper darkness, watching, waiting. The storm of battle raged around Justia Pharos, the crackling hum of his psychic hard singing through the air as he parried the Demon Prince's onslaught. The grey skies above still churned bleeding malice into the material world. But the Grey Knights held fast, their nemesis weapons burned with the Emperor's wrath, slicing through demonic flesh like holy fire through parchment. Yet even amidst the chaos of war, Pharaoh's mind was calm. The battle was part of his existence, but it was not all that defined him. In the back of his thoughts, as his force weapon clashed against the demon's blade, another presence lingered his mind, touching on the shadowy alliance his chapter shared with the Odom Malus. The Grey Knights were not just warriors, they were hunters, silent, invisible, predators tasked with seeking out the foulest manifestations of chaos and erasing them from the annals of history. This was their creed to fight, the enemies that no one could ever know had existed. They did not defend worlds for glory or honor. There would be no parades for their victories, no mentions in the scrolls of imperial history. The Imperium they served would never sing their praises, and that was exactly as it must be, because knowledge of the Grey Knights was as dangerous as the demons they fought long ago in the time after. Their creation. The Emperor's High Lords had entrusted their deployment to an arm of the Imperium that could operate in the same secrecy. The Ordo Malos, a branch of the Inquisition created solely for the purpose of combating the forces of the Warp, where the Ordo Hereticus hunted the enemies within the cultists and witches who threatened imperial purity. The Ordo Malus hunted the enemies beyond the demonic forces that sought to tear reality apart. Feros had fought beside the Inquisition many times. Though it was never an alliance of equals, the Inquisitors of the Ordo Malos were powerful and feared, even among the highest ranks of the Adepts. Terror, they wielded authority over entire planetary systems, their word carrying the weight of execution, extermination, or worse. Yet even they feared the Grey Knights, for as fearsome as an Inquisitor was, they were human mortal and mortal shad limits. Grey Knights did not. There had been times when Feros had stood in the presence of Inquisitors being so, laden with power that their every word was like a knife edge, their authority palpable Inquisitors who could literate a planetary governor with a mere glance, who could order exterminatus, the death of entire worlds, without a second thought. And yet when they addressed the Grey Knights, even they were careful, for in the hidden hierarchy of the Imperium, the Grey Knights answered only to the Emperor. They were bound to the Order Malus, but they were not its servants in truth. The Inquisitors relied on them as much as they commanded them. When the warp-spawned horrors of chaos threatened to breach reality, it was the Grey Knights who stood as the last line of defense, invisible to the rest of the Imperium. And when the battle was done, when the demons were banished and the threat eradicated, it was the Grey Knights who ensured that no memory of the event remained. Feros recalled the words of Inquisitor Tethra, the last Inquisitor he had worked with, standing amidst the smoking ruins of a hive world that had nearly been consumed by a demonic incursion. Do you understand why your chapter cannot be known? Tethra's voice had been sharp, but there was a flicker of something behind his eyes. Fear, perhaps, or awe. The masses must never see. They cannot know that these things exist, that their nightmares are real. If they did, the Emperor's domain would fall into madness. We, the Inquisition, we wipe away the traces, seal the records, mind-wipe the survivors. But you are the true. Silence. Feros had said nothing in return. He hadn't needed to. It was a truth as old as this chapter itself. They fought for the soul of mankind. But humanity could never know it. They were the shadowed hunters, serasing the very memory of their battles as they cleansed the corruption of chaos. So now, as the D-Prince's claws scraped against his herd, Feros felt the weight of that same duty. Once more this planet, Vanra S, would soon face that eraser the survivors. If there were any, would not remember the Grey Knights, they would not recall the demonic horrors that had nearly consumed their world. The Order Malus would see to that, their THS and agents descending upon the planet in the wake of the battle to purge all knowledge of the event. History itself would be rewritten, and the people would believe it had been an insurrection or a plague or some other misfortune of the Imperium as it had been before. So it would be. Again, Feros twisted his body, bringing the full force of his herd down in a crushing arc. The blade, alight with psychic energy, sliced deep into the Demon Prince's chest. A roar of agony split the air, but the prince did not falter it. raised a massive claw, striking out in a flurry of blows that would have shattered the defenses of any lesser being. But the Grey Knights were more than human around Pharos. His brothers moved with mechanical precision. Brother Alan darted in with a blazing strike from his force sword, while Justice Aralis unleashed a psychic barrage that sent warborn tendrils writhing back into Thamum. Each of them was a blade of the Emperor, perfectly honed, perfectly controlled. Their minds were locked in. Unity, their thoughts shielded from the corrupting whispers of chaos by the psychic wards they bore in their very flesh. Yet even as they pressed their advantage, Pharos felt the weight of the prince's gaze. The demon was smiling. The prince, though wounded, though being driven back, was not afraid. "You are fools." This its voice, a grinding mix of hatred and amusement. "You think this will end here? You think you can simply erase the warp with your weapons and your minds? I have seen the heart of your Imperium. It is already mine. Your emperor is nothing but a corpse on a throne, his empire rotting from within, and you, his hounds, you are nothing but relics, shadows of a shadow." Pharos felt the stirring of doubt in the back of his mind, but he crushed them with a practiced discipline. Demons lied always. It was their nature. They sowed despair and madness as easily as breathing. His purpose was clear. His brother's purpose was clear. Without hesitation, he slammed the butt of his herd into the ground, sending a shockwave of psychic force rippling outwards. The ground cracked beneath the demon's feet, and for the first time the creature stumbled. Pharos pressed forward, his brothers moving in perfect synchronicity. Beside him, they did not speak. They did not need to. Their mission was simple: to eradicate, to destroy Tokliance. "Your words are ash, Pharos," growled his voice, calm but full of iron. "We are not your prey. We're your end." The demon prince snarled, its flaming eyes narrowing, its form shifted, swelling with power as it drew more energy from the warp reality itself bent around the creature, the sky darkening, the clouds boiling with unnatural light. But Pharos and his brothers stood firm, their psychic wards burning bright in the darkness. "Even if you kill me," the demon spat, "I will return. You cannot destroy me. None of you can. You may kill the body, but the essence, the soul, those belong to the dark gods, and they will not be denied." Foes was silent, his men focused on the task at hand. The demon's words washed over him like water against the stone. He had heard them before countless times, from countless enemies, and each time he had answered in the same way, with death. With a swift, decisive strike, Pharos plunged his H into the demon's chest, the blade sinking deep into its corrupt flesh. The creature howled a sound that seemed to tear at the very fabric of reality. But Pharos did not stop. He pushed forward, driving the blade deeper, psychic energy flaring from the weapon in waves of purifying light. The demon's form began to unravel its body, dissolving into smoke and ash, its roars fading into the void. For a brief moment, the air was thick with the stench of ozone and burnt flesh. Then, with a final piercing scream, the demon prince was gone, banished back to the warp. But Pharos knew this was not the end. It was never the end. The demon prince had spoken. The truth, in one regard chaos, could not be truly destroyed. It could only be driven back, contained, delayed. But that was their duty to fight. An eternal war against an enemy that could never be fully defeated. As the battlefield fell silent, the Grey Knights stood amidst the ruins, their silvered armor gleaming in the dim light of the dying day they had won for now. But already Pharos could feel the presence of the Oad Malus approaching. They would come as they always did, to wipe the memories of the survivors, to rewrite the history of this battle in a few days. perhaps a few weeks, Vandra VII would no longer remember the demonic invasion. The people would forget the horrors they had witnessed, and the Grey Knights would be nothing more than a fading dream, lost to the fog of war. That was how it had always been, how it must be, as Pharos and his brothers gathered their weapons and prepared to depart. A cold voice crackled over the Vox Link Justicar. Pharos, the voice of Inquisitor Tethra, came, through laced with authority and familiarity. The daemon is gone. Good, now leave this place. The eraser protocols are already in motion. There will be no trace of your involvement. Herr Pharos didn't respond. He didn't need to. The Inquisition had spoken, and the Grey Knights would fade back into the shadows as they always had, as they always would. They were the Emperor's secret weapon, his hunters in the dark, and no one could ever know they existed as the Grey Knights disappeared into the void. The people of Vandra VII would remember nothing of their salvation but their souls, if only for a brief moment, would remain untainted by the horrors of the warp. It was enough it had to be before the heresy, before the galaxy was torn under the Emperor, had long prepared for the eventual betrayal of his sons. Though his vision for mankind had been one of enlightenment, he was ever aware of the insidious power of chaos. He knew the Primer, his genetically engineered demigod sons, were mighty, but also vulnerable to the malevolent forces of the warp, as chaos sowed doubt and discontent among the ranks of his armies. The Emperor recognized the need for a specialized Force One that would be untainted by the same flaws that had plagued even his most loyal sons. However, the Emperor's focus remained on the Great Crusade, and his vision of such a force remained unrealized. It was only after Horus, his most favored son, fell to chaos and launched the galaxy into civil war that the Emperor understood the full extent of the threat. After the brutal siege of Terra and his ultimate confrontation with Horus, the Emperor was left mortally wounded in Omed in the Golden Throne to sustain his shattered body. But even in his near-death state, the Emperor's mind worked, anticipating the future dangers that chaos would pose to mankind before retreating into the Golden Throne. The Emperor gave one last set of commands to his most trusted servant, Malcador the Sigite, in the final bitter days of the Horus. Heresia's terror burned, and the Imperium trembled on the edge of annihilation. The Emperor knew that the wars to come would be even more insidious. Though Horus had been slain, though the Emperor had shattered his traitorous son's soul with his own hand, the ruinous powers of chaos had tasted the blood of mankind. The galaxy had been thrown into chaos. Demonic incursions surged through the warp and reality alike, hungry for vengeance. The Emperor, now broken and ennomed upon the Golden Throne, would be unable to defend humanity directly, and so in his final moments of lucidity, the Emperor gave a command, a secret that would live only in the minds of a chosen few. That secret was the birth of the Grey Knights. The architect of this plan was his most trusted servant, the man known as Malcador the Sigit. To understand the significance of Maldor's role in the founding of the Grey Knights, one must first understand who Malcador was. Often described as a shadowy figure, Maldor's exact origins were lost to the mist of prehistory. But his influence on the Emperor and the Imperium was beyond question. As First Lord of the Imperium, he wielded authority, second only to the Emperor himself. He was the master of the Council of Terror, the architect of the imperial bureaucracy, and one of the few mortals who could claim to truly understand the Emperor's grand vision. But more than his political authority, Malcador was the Emperor's most trusted confidant. He was privy to knowledge that even the Primarchs did not possess, and he carried secrets that could unmake the Imperium if ever revealed. though he was no warrior, Malcador was a psycho of immense power and subtlety. His abilities honed not through battlefield dominance, but through his unmatched understanding of the arcane and the warp. He was the Emperor's spy, master, his advisor, and some whispered the only being in the galaxy who could rival the Emperor's understanding of chaos, where the Emperor was a god of war. Malcador was a master of intrigue, working behind the scenes to hold the fabric of the Imperium together as the Horus came to its cataclysmic conclusion. Malcador saw the true scope of the threat that chaos posed. The betrayal of the traitor legions had nearly sundered the galaxy, and worse still, their souls had been corrupted by the foul gods of the warp, the might of the Imperium's armies, the brilliance of the Emperor's strategies, and the courage of the loyalist Primarchs. All of it had barely been enough to stave off annihilation. It was Malcador who saw what wastrelly at stake chaos had claimed. The souls of beings as powerful as the Primarchs themselves, demigods forged by the Emperor's hand. If they could be turned, what hope did ordinary men have? Even the Adeptus, Artis, the Space Marines, though mighty, were not immune to the corrupting whispers of the warp. The heresy had proven that what was needed, now Malcador reasoned, was something more than just strength of arms. What was needed was purity, a force that could stand against chaos and remain untainted no matter what. Temptations or terrors the ruinous powers unleashed. As the siege of Terror reached its brutal conclusion, the Emperor summoned Malcador to his side. The Emperor was not yet broken, but he knew that the battle with Horus would leave him gravely wounded even then, on the brink of victory and death. The Emperor foresaw the threats that would come after the heresy. The ruinous powers were not defeated, they were merely driven back, licking their wounds, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. Horus's fall was but the first of many battles that would be fought against chaos. Malcador knelt before the Emperor, listening as his master laid out a vision of the future, a future in which mankind's greatest threat would come not from the stars, but from the warp itself. The Emperor spoke of demons of powers so foul and ancient that they would not be deterred by conventional armies. He spoke of the traitor legions now fully in the grip of chaos returning to the Imperium. As tools of the dark gods, he spoke of the need for a new kind of warrior. Your task, Malcador, is to create a force, the Emperor said, a brotherhood of knights who will stand against the darkness. They will be my final gift to mankind. My last secret weapon. They must be incorruptible, immune to the powers that have taken so many of my sons. They will know no fear, no temptation. They will fight in the shadows, and they will be forgotten by all, but they will be the bulwark that holds back the night. Malcador bowed his head, understanding the gravity of the command he had been given. He knew that this was the Emperor's last hope for humanity. The Grey Knights would be the hidden guardians of the Imperium, unknown, even to its greatest defenders, a weapon that could never be allowed to fall into the wrong hands. With that, Malcador began his most secret work. Mordor's first task was to find those individuals who could form the foundation of this new order. The Emperor had given him broad instructions, but Malcador knew that strength alone would not suffice. The heresy had shown that even the mightiest warriors, even those created by the Emperor himself, could fall to the temptations of chaos. What he needed were warriors who'd already proven their ability to resist the darkest of temptations, individuals who had faced the horrors of the war and had emerged untainted. To this end, Malcador scoured the shattered Imperium, searching for men who possessed not only martial prowess, but also unwavering loyalty to the Emperor. Some were drawn from the remnants of the loyalist legions, those battle brothers who had survived the heresy, but had not been tempted by the corruption that had claimed so many of their kin. Others were individuals of rare psychic talent pyres who had not succumbed to the madness that often claimed. Those with a strong connection to the warp among these chosen were veterans of the Lunar Wolves who had remained loyal, even as their legion fell to the sway of Horus. Others were drawn from the Imperial Fist's white scars and blood, angels, warriors who had fought at the Emperor's side during the Siege of Terror. They had proven their loyalty, their skill, and most importantly, their purity. But Malador did not stop with estates. He also sought out individuals from the Adeptus caste. Odes, the Emperor's personal guard. The Custodes were not space marines. They were something more, a higher form of warrior designed to protect the Emperor at all costs. Their Genan seed was even more refined. Their training, even more grueling. Some of these custodians would join the Nent Grey Knights, lending their strength and their knowledge of the Emperor's secrets to the new order to ensure that these warriors would remain forever untainted. Malador subjected them to grueling trials. They were taken deep into the warp, where they were forced to confront the demons of chaos, directly those who could resist the whispers of the dark gods, who could face the horrors of the Emirium and return with their minds and souls intact, were chosen to form the first generation of Grey Knights. The physical and mental purity of the Grey Knights was paramount, but even more important was their genetic lineage. Unlike other Space Marine chapters which were created from the genoseed of the Emperor's Primarch, the Grey Knights would be different. Malador knew that the Primarchs, despite their strength, had been vulnerable to the influence of chaos. He could not risk the same fate befalling the Grey Knights. For this reason, the Grey Knights would be created from the Emperor's own gene seed. This was the most potent and pure genetic material in existence. Free from the flaws and weaknesses that had affected the Primarch, the Emperor's genetic code was incorruptible, and it would form the foundation of the Grey Knight's resilience against chaos. But creating a chapter from the Emperor's gene seed was no simple task. The process was painstaking, involving the most advanced genetic and psychic manipulation techniques available to the Imperium. Each Grey Knight was a masterpiece of genetic engineering, their bodies enhanced beyond even the most elite. Space Marines, their psychic abilities were amplified, their souls shielded by wards drawn directly from the Emperor's own power. This connection to the Emperor was more than symbolic. It meant that every Grey Knight carried a piece of the Emperor's light within them, a spark of the divine will that had once guided the Imperium. This light was their greatest weapon against the demons of the warp, for no demon could stand against the Emperor's purity. It was this purity that made the Grey Knights unique. They were immune to the corrupting influence of chaos. Not just resistant, but utterly immune. No Grey Knight had ever fallen to the ruinous powers, and none ever would once the selection of the first Grey Knights was complete. Malcador needed a place to house this new order the Emperor had commanded, that the Grey Knights remain secret, hidden from the eyes of the wider Imperium. To that end, Malador chose Titan, one of Saturn's moons, as their fortress monastery. Titan, like the Grey Knights themselves, was removed from the Imperium's prying eyes in the final days of the Horus heresy. Malador had ordered the moon to be hidden in the warp, sealing it away from the devastation that racked the galaxy, while Titan existed in the warp time, moved differently, and the Grey Knights were able to train and grow in strength, while the rest of the Imperium rebuilt itself in the aftermath of the heresy. When Titan returned to real space, the Grey Knights emerged as a fully formed chapter, their numbers, boasted by recruits who had been drawn from across the Imperium. Their fortress monastery became a bastion of knowledge and power, equipped with Forbidden Tom's relics and weapons that would aid them in their eternal war against the forces of chaos. With their founding complete, the Grey Knights took up the Emperor's secret war under the command of Theodor Malos, the diamond hunting arm of the Inquisition. the Grey Knights began their mission to eradicate the demonic from the galaxy they fought. In the shadows, their existence hidden from the Imperium at large, only the highest-ranking members of the Inquisition knew of their existence, and even fewer understood the true scope of their purpose for 10,000 years. The Grey Knights have waged their war in silence. Their victories go uncelebrated, their sacrifices unknown, but without them, the Imperium would have fallen long ago to the insidious power of chaos. They are the Emperor's last line of defense, his final secret weapon against the darkness that threatens to consume all Moldor's work had been completed, and though he would not live to see the full fruits of his labor, his legacy endured in the unbreakable purity of the Grey Knights. They were the embodiment of the Emperor's will, the perfect warriors created to stand against the greatest evil the galaxy had ever known in the vast, war-torn galaxy of the 41st millennium, where colossal armies clash on countless worlds and entire star systems burn in the fires. Of battle there exists a war that is unseen, a war that is fought not for territory, resources, or glory, but for the very soul of humanity. It is a war waged in secret, hidden from the masses, from the military machine of the Imperium, and even from the highest echelons of power. It is the war fought by the Grey Knights, an elite brotherhood of warriors, whose purpose is the eradication of chaos. This war is unlike any other. It is fought not in the open, but in the shadows, in the darkest corners of the galaxy, where the light of the Emperor barely reaches it. Is a war that leaves no survivors, no witnesses, and no traces behind. And it is a war that must remain hidden at all costs, for the knowledge of what the Grey Knights face could tear the Imperium apart from within. This is the Silent War, a conflict that has raged for 10,000 years, unspoken and unseen, yet essential to the survival of the human race. The Grey Knights are not like other Space Marine chapters. While the Ultramarines, Blood Angels, and Imperial S wage their wars in the open, defending Imperial worlds from Xenos, invaders, and rebellious human factions, the Grey Knights fight a very different kind of battle. Their war is against the demons of the warp, the foul, malevolent entities that serve the Chaos Gods. These creatures are not bound by the physical laws of the universe. They are born from the raw, chaotic energies of the warp, a realm of madness and malice that exists beyond the material world. To fight such enemies requires more than physical might. It requires psychic power, spiritual fortitude, and an unwavering purity that only the Grey Knights possess. But the Silent War is not just a battle against demons, it is a battle against knowledge itself, the very existence of demons. The realization that the creatures of nightmare are real could shatter the fragile faith of the Imperium. The Grey Knights understand that to protect humanity, they must not only destroy these entities, but also erase all traces of their presence. If the common citizenry of the Imperium were to learn the full extent of the demonic threat, the resulting panic and despair could cause untold chaos, weakening the Emperor's dominion from within. For this reason, the Grey Knights operate in the shadows, leaving no evidence of their battles. They do not fight alongside the As Militarum or the other Space Marine chapters unless absolutely necessary, and when they do, they ensure that no one lives to tell the tale of what they have seen. Survivors are mind-wiped. By the Order Malus, the Inquisition's branch dedicated to fighting demons, their memories scrubbed clean of any knowledge of the demonic incursion, even the Ares of other chapters. Mighty warriors, though they cannot be allowed to remember the horrors the Grey Knights face. This is the first truth of the Silent War. It is a war not only against chaos, but against memory itself. The Grey Knights were created for this very purpose as the Emperor's secret weapon. They are the only force in the galaxy, immune to the corrupting influence of chaos, unlike other Ares chapters, who have occasionally succumbed to the temptations of the dark gods. No Grey Knight has ever fallen to chaos. Their psychic wards, etched into their very souls, and their unwavering devotion to the Emperor protect them from the whispers of the warp. This purity makes them the ultimate weapon against demons. But purity comes at a cost. The Grey Knights are isolated from the rest of humanity, bound by a code of secrecy that prevents them from ever truly being part of the Imperium they defend. They operate from their fortress monastery on Titan Amun of Saturn, which is hidden from the galaxy at large. Only the Ordo Malus knows the full extent of the Grey Knights' existence, and even within the Inquisition, their activities are closely guarded. Secrets the Silent War requires that the Grey Knights remain invisible, for their very presence could raise questions that the Imperium cannot afford to answer. The Silent War is not fought in the grand campaigns that other Space Marines lead, but in surgical strikes, precision missions that are over before anyone even realizes the threat was present. When a demon infestation takes root on a world, the Grey Knights are dispatched to cleanse it, often in the dead of night or in the hidden places of a city where no one will see. Their war is fought in abandoned hives, forgotten star systems, or deep within the warp itself, where the very air is thick with Pal. The battles of the Silent War are swift and brutal. The Grey Knights do not engage in drawn-out sieges or campaigns. They strike with the precision of Ascalpel, severing the head of the demonic incursion before it can spread. Sometimes they must destroy entire cults or chaos-tainted organizations, erasing every member to ensure that no one can spread the infection further. In other instances, they are called upon to banish demons who have already begun to manifest in the material realm, using their psychic powers and nemesis, force weapons to tear the creatures apart and send them screaming back into the warp. The Grey Knights do not fight the Silent War alone. Their allies in this secret conflict are the Inquisitors of the Ordo Malus, the demon-hunting division of the Inquisition. These Inquisitors are among the most powerful and feared individual ULs in the Imperium, wielding the authority to command entire star systems, call exterminators on worlds, and execute any who stand in their way. But despite their power, the Inquisitors of the Ordo Malus know that the Grey Knights are something beyond even their reach. Inquisitors often work alongside the Grey Knights, using their vast network of spies and informants to track down demonic incursions before they can escalate. These Inquisitors are also responsible for the erasure of all evidence of the Grey Knights' actions after a battle is won. The Inquisition moves in to cleanse the site of any lingering taint if survivors remain. Whether they are soldiers of the Astrum Militarum civilians or even fellow Aartes, they are either mind-wiped or eliminated to ensure that no knowledge of the Grey Knights or the demonic threat escapes. This coordination between the Grey Knights and the Ordo Malus is essential to the Silent War. The Grey Knights have no interest in politics, governance, or the broader workings of the Imperium. Their sole purpose is to destroy demons. The Inquisition, however, must work within the broader framework of the Imperium, ensuring that order is maintained and that the Emperor's subjects remain loyal in this way. The Ordo Malus and the Grey Knights work together to protect the Imperium from the knowledge that could destroy it. But the secrecy that surrounds the Grey Knights comes with a cost. The Silent War is a burden that weighs heavily on the shoulders of those who fight it for the Grey Knights. The knowledge that they will never be remembered, never celebrated, is a constant reminder of their place in the Imperium. They are not like other Space Marines who fight for the glory of their chapter, the honor of their Primarch, or the admiration of the citizens of the Imperium. The Grey Knights fight only for the Emperor and their reward is to be forgotten. The psychological toll of this endless war is great. Each Grey Knight is trained from the moment of their induction to embrace their role as the Emperor's invisible hand. But even the most disciplined mind can feel the weight of isolation. The knowledge that they must kill even their fellow humans to preserve the secrecy of their order is a burden that some struggle to bear for the Grey Knights. There are no parades, no honors, no legacy. They are shadows passing through the galaxy, unseen, leaving only death and silence in their wake. But this burden is not theirs alone. The Inquisitors of the Order Malus also bear the weight of the silent war. They must make decisions that no mortal should be forced to make, decisions that can determine the fate of entire worlds. Inquisitors who work alongside the Grey Knights often find themselves isolated from their peers, haunted by the knowledge of the true scale of the threat that chaos poses. These Inquisitors are not only responsible for destroying demonic infestations, but also for ensuring that the Imperium remains ignorant of the danger that lurks in the warp. For the Inquisitors of the Ordo Malos, the silent war is a lonely one they cannot share. What they know with their fellow Inquisitors, or even their closest allies, for to do so would risk exposing the Grey Knights. They live in a world of secrets and shadows, never able to fully trust anyone, always on guard against the possibility of betrayal. In many ways, the Inquisitors who fight the silent war are as isolated as the Grey Knights themselves, despite the secrecy that surrounds the silent war. Its impact on the Imperium is profound. The silent war is the invisible foundation upon which the Imperium's continued existence rests. Without the Grey Knights and the Ordo Malus, the demonic incursions that plague the galaxy would spread unchecked, bringing entire star systems to ruin. The horrors of chaos would be known to all, and the Imperium would fall into despair and madness. Though the silent war is fought in the shadows, it is the war that truly keeps the Imperium safe. It is the war that ensures that humanity can continue to live in ignorance of the terrible forces that threaten it from beyond the stars. And though the Grey Knights will never be celebrated for their role in this war, they continue to fight, knowing that their sacrifices are necessary to protect the soul of mankind. The silent war will never end as long as chaos exists, as long as demons seek to breach the material universe. The Grey Knights will be there, hidden in the shadows, waging their eternal war. They are the Emperor's final gift to humanity, hisslant protectors, and the shield that guards the Imperium from the darkness of the warp. In a galaxy consumed by endless war, where hope flickers like a dying flame, there are few who can truly claim to be incorruptible. The Imperium of man, vast and ancient, is filled with corruption, betrayal and despair. Even the mighty Space Marines, the Emperor's angels of death, have not proven immune to the insidious whispers of chaos. Whole legions have turned traitor, forsaking their oaths of loyalty for the promises of dark power. But in this grim galaxy, there exists one brotherhood that stands apart. They are the Grey Knights, and their dedication to the Emperor, their resistance to corruption, Ion, and their eternal war against the demonic are all bound by a singular, unshakable commitment. The unbreakable oath. The Grey Knights are more than mere warriors. They are the living embodiment of the Emperor's will, forged in secret, tempered by discipline, and sworn to a cause greater than any individual. This oath, a solemn vow taken by every Grey Knight upon their initiation, is the foundation of their identity. It binds them to their purpose, defines their duty, and ensures their incorruptibility. To understand the Grey Knights is to understand the weight of this oath, a vow that is both a burden and a shield and ironclad promised to the Emperor and the Imperium, that no Grey Knight will ever fall. To chaos, The unbreakable oath was born in the darkest days of the Horus heresy, when the galaxy stood on the precipice of destruction, as the Emperor lay mortally wounded on the golden throne. His dreams of a united Imperium shattered by the betrayal of his most beloved son. The need for a new kind of warrior became evident. The Space Marine legions, once the pride of the Imperium, had proven fallible. Many had fallen to chaos, and the loyalty of even the remaining loyalist forces had been tested to its limits. It was in this time of doubt and despair that Malkador, the City-Gelite, the Emperor's most trusted servant, was tasked with creating the Grey Knights. Malkador knew that, to fight the forces of chaos, these warriors would need to be more than just strong. They would need to be incorruptible, immune to the temptations that had seduced even the Primarchs. But how could such a thing be achieved? The answer lay in the creation of a sacred oath, a vow that would be as much a spiritual and psychic bond as it was a spoken commitment. This oath would be more than just words. It would be woven into the very essence of the Grey Knights, sealed with the psychic power of the Emperor himself. The warriors who took this oath would be bound by it for eternity, and their souls would be shielded from the taint of chaos by the strength of their vow. The unbreakable oath is not a simple pledge of loyalty. It is a multi-layered vow binding the Grey Knights not only to their brothers and their chapter, but also to the Emperor and to the Imperium. Upon their initiation, every Grey Knight undergoes a series of grueling trials, both physical and psychic, to prove their worth. The final act of their initiation is the swearing of the oath, a sacred ritual conducted in the deepest sanctums of Titan the Grey, Knight's Fortress Monastery. In this ceremony, the initiate stands before a gathering of their brothers and their chapter's highest-ranking officers, including the chapter master and the grand masters of the chapter's 8 brotherhoods. The initiate kneels, and with one hand placed upon the hilt of their nemesis force weapon, they speak the words of the oath. These words are not spoken aloud in the common tongue, but are conveyed psychically, with each word resonating through the minds of those present, a mental chant that binds the initiate's soul to the chapter The oath has 3 core tenets, each representing a fundamental aspect of the Grey Knight's existence. 1. Loyalty to the Emperor. The first and most crucial tenet of the oath is absolute loyalty to the Emperor. A Grey Knight's life is devoted entirely to the service of the Emperor, whom they see not only as a ruler, but as a god. They do not question the Emperor's will, nor do they falter in their faith. Their loyalty is not to the Imperium's political institutions, nor even to their chapter alone. It is to the Emperor himself, whose light guides them in their eternal battle against chaos. This tenet is reinforced by psychic wards implanted in the minds of every Grey Knight, ensuring that no doubt or heresy can ever take root. 2. Purity of the soul. The second tenet of the oath is purity. A great knight swears to maintain the purity of their soul, resisting the temptations and corruptions of the warp where other Space Marines have fallen prey to the promises of chaos. The Grey Knights remain steadfast. They train relentlessly, not just in the arts of war, but in the psychic disciplines that shield their minds from the whispers of the dark gods. Their armor is inscribed with wards of protection, and their very souls are fortified by the psychic power of the Emperor. The O of purity ensures that no Grey Knight can ever be swayed, no matter how powerful the demonic forces they face. 3. The eternal hunt. The final tenet is the promise of eternal vigilance and duty. A Grey Knight swears to fight the forces of chaos for as long as they live without respite or hesitation. This aspect of the oath binds them to the endless war against the demonic, a war that has no end and no reward. Grey Knights do not tire, they do not seek glory, and they do not expect recognition. Their war is fought in the shadows, unseen by the rest of the Imperium, to take the oath is to accept that their lives will be spent in the service of a war that may never be won. It is to acknowledge that they are weapons to be wielded by the Emperor in the defense of mankind, even if mankind never knows their name, while the words of the unbreakable oath are powerful. That their true strength lies in the psychic bond that is formed during the initiation ceremony. As the initiate speaks the oath, they are not merely making a promise. They are forging a psychic connection with the Emperor himself. This bond is reinforced by the Grand Masters of the chapter, who use their considerable psychic powers to anchor the oath in the soul of the initiate. This psychic bond is a twofold protection. First, it serves as a constant reminder of the initiates' beauty and loyalty, an unbreakable tether that keeps them grounded in their purpose. But more importantly, it acts as a shield against the warp. The power of the oath combined with the psychic wards etched into the Grey Knight's armor, and flesh forms an impenetrable barrier against the corrupting influence of chaos. No matter how powerful the demons they face, no matter how seductive the promises of the dark gods, a Grey Knight's soul remains pure, protected by the power of their oath. This psychic connection is not just a passive defense. It is also an active weapon in battle. Grey Knights can draw upon the strength of their oath to fuel their psychic powers, allowing them to channel the Emperor's light directly into their nemesis weapons. This makes them devastatingly effective against demons whose very existence is anathema to the Emperor's. Purity, the unbreakable oath, is more than a ritualistic bond. It is an absolute commitment to break the oath. It is unthinkable not just because of the spiritual consequences, but because the oath itself is designed to prevent any possibility of corruption. No Grey Knight has ever fallen to chaos, and none ever will. This is not just due to their training or their psychic abilities, but because the oath ensures that any Grey Knight who begins to falter will die before they can fall. The psychic bond forged during the initiation ceremony acts as a failsafe if a Grey Knight were ever to begin succumbing to the whispers of chaos, if doubt or heresy were ever to take root in their mind. The bond would activate, purging the corruption by destroying the individual. This process is instantaneous and painless, ensuring that no Grey Knight ever lives long enough to betray their brothers or the Emperor. It is a testament to the strength of the oath that in the 10,000 years since the founding of the Grey Knights, no such activation has ever been necessary. In addition to this psychic fail-safe, the Grey Knights themselves are vigilant in upholding the oath. Their discipline is absolute, and they constantly watch for any sign of weakness or doubt among their brothers. Those who show the slightest hint of faltering are subjected to rigorous psychic testing, and if any corruption is detected, they are immediately executed, their bodies incinerated, and their souls purified, while the unbreakable oath grants the Grey Knight strength and purity. It is also a heavy burden to take. The oath is to forfeit any hope of a normal life. Grey Knights do not retire. They do not seek peace, and they do not receive the recognition or rewards that other Space Marines enjoy. Their war is fought in the shadows, and their victories are never celebrated. They're bound to the oath for life, and when they die alone, their deeds forgotten by all but their brothers. The psychological toll of this burden is immense. Grey Knights must not only contend with the horrors of the warp, but also with the knowledge that they will never see the fruits of their labor. They are doomed to fight an endless war against an enemy that cannot be truly defeated, and yet they fight on because their oath demands it. Their faith in the Emperor and their commitment to the Imperium are all that sustain them. In the face of this overwhelming burden for the Grey Knights, the unbreakable oath is both a source of strength and a constant reminder of their duty. It is a vow that cannot be broken, a promise that must be upheld no matter the cost, and it is the foundation upon which the entire chapter stands. Without the oath, the Grey Knights would be vulnerable to the same temptations that have claimed so many others, but with it, they are invincible. The unbreakable oath has defined the Grey Knights for 10,000 years. It has allowed them to wage an eternal war against the demonic, to stand as the Emperor's final defense against the horrors of the warp. The oath ensures that no Grey Knight will ever fall to chaos, and it binds them to their sacred mission of protecting mankind from the darkness beyond the stars, as long as the Grey Knights exist, as long as the oath is upheld. The Imperium has a chance to survive. The Grey Knights' war may be fought in secret, their deeds may go unrecognized, but their impact on the Imperium is undeniable. They are the Emperor's last best hope, the unbreakable shield that stands between humanity and the forces of chaos, and they will fight until their last breath, bound by the oath that can never be broken.